Let's go to screen share. Lots of fun this weekend. Let's see. So today we're going to do a kind of the next pick up where we left off through observation and judgment. And so we're going to talk this morning about wisdom through observation, because really that's what observation is really all about. Is it how do we use our skills of observation to learn, and then in learning, right, comes wisdom. So I'm not going to read this to you, but let's just take a second, and I want you to read this. This is from Mary Ann Williamson. And if you don't know her, if you haven't heard of her, she's really excellent. Been around a long time, since the late 70s, written a number of books, but her quotes are amazing, and any of her podcasts or TED Talks are great. So why don't we just take a minute and why don't we just read this? This is actually one of my favorite quotes. It's long. So every time I read that, it always has impact on me. And you know, one of the things that, and as it relates today, it's one reason why I chose this, is that the second line in here, our deepest fear is not that we are powerful beyond measure, because it really talks to about wisdom and experiences and how experiences lead to our wisdom. And we've talked about this before, and I really don't ever feel like we can stress this enough, right? Is that experiences are for us, are for us to learn from. They don't define us. So when we have experiences, I was listening to a podcast this morning at the gym. I was talking about this woman who ended up having, you know, needed to have a heart transplant. Her house went to foreclosure. Her spouse was an alcoholic, an abusive spouse, all these other things, right? And at one moment, she realized that I'm supposed to be having all these experiences so that I can help other people. And so that's where experiences are here for us to learn from. They don't define us. And I always believe this, I always have, is that we're spiritual beings brought here to learn. There's no other reason for us to be here but to learn. And so that's all part of the being an observation and then converting that observation to wisdom. So we continually have experiences, and those experiences are what give us the information for the next leg of our journey. And so, you know, it's like the old expression, well, you know, we don't know what we don't know. And so we're kind of all perfect until we run into something that we've never experienced before. And then once we experience it, whether it went well or not so well, or whatever the case may be, it really doesn't matter. There's no judgment to it, right? Learning is not about judgment. Learning is about learning. And so we're all perfect until we have the next experience, which means that I've come here, I've gotten to a certain point, I'm going to have a new experience. I don't know. I've never been here before. I don't know what to do. So that's where we're not in judgment, and that's when we're in observation. Because what I'm going to learn through this new experience, whatever it is, could be personal, could be business, it doesn't matter what it is. What I'm going to learn is, you know, I was brought here for me to have this information for the next part of my journey. I'm not supposed to know. And I think in a lot of cultures, especially Western culture, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to know. Like we're supposed to be perfect out of the box. It doesn't work that way. So until we have our next learning experience, we're kind of perfect. And then we have that experience, we gain that, and then we learn from it. We learn how to handle that experience. Again, when we see it, we're going to talk about repeating cycles in a couple more slides. And that's what really it's all about, right? We're perfect until we have the next experience. And then as we go through that experience, we're learning, and then we're heading off to our next leg of the journey. This is probably my absolute favorite quote. I don't know who said it, but wisdom is the experience without the emotion. And so when we talked about being an observation in the last session we had before the holiday, about, wisdom is the experience without the emotion. So once we bring emotion into an experience, what happens is we stop learning, because emotion typically means judgment. Once we're in judgment, we're no longer observing, which means we're no longer learning. And so that's where wisdom comes into place. Once we strip out all the emotion around things, judgment, good, bad, right, wrong, he said, she said, I'm entitled, they shouldn't have, whatever, all that stuff, right? Once we strip all that out of it, then we get wisdom. And then the experiences matter more. And one of the concepts that I've really grown to understand is that, feelings are for the heart, but wisdom's for the soul. Because if we would all agree that we're here to learn, then the most important thing we can do for our souls is to learn. It's the most important thing. It's really the only reason why we're here. We learn from each other, we learn from our kids, we learn from our parents, learn from our coworkers, we learn from our interpersonal experiences we have that we don't share with people, because we all have them. We learn by being introspective about things that, maybe some do-overs. I wish I had handled that differently. The problem with that, though, is we didn't know at the time. So I'm kind of a firm believer is that there's no day that I would want to have back. There's just no day. The most important day I've got is today, and there's no other day that I ever would want to have back. Maybe the birth of my grandchildren and children. But even then, I love where I am today, and I love where I am with my relationship with them. So why would I want to go back? And so feelings, if you remember, we've talked about the heart, right? The heart is the magnetic field around the heart's 100,000 times more strong or stronger than that of the brain. Okay, the heart has 40,000 up to 40,000 neuron cells. It actually has its own brain within it. It's not that the brain sends signals to the heart, it's actually the other way around. So feelings are for the heart, but wisdom is for the soul. So every time we learn something, every time we have an experience where we're learning something new, that goes right to our soul. So we talked a lot in past sessions about being an observation. And so when we're in observation, we're the director, we're the writer, we're the actor, right? Which means that when we're in observation, we are slightly above the situation. If follow my hand here, we're slightly above, and we're slightly kind of looking down and observing, okay? And we're not a full-fledged participant. We're not participating in the drama, okay? We're not taking sides, for instance. We're not judging. And once we put all that aside, the drama, the taking sides, the judgment, persecution complex, jealousy, all those types of things, once we strip all those out and we move them aside, now we're in pure observation, and pure observation leads to wisdom. So let's talk about repeating cycles, and this is really important. So we're going to start with an experience. So we're having an experience. Through that experience, we move to observation. Once we move into observation, we start to gain wisdom. So it's kind of this cycle. Now, repeating cycles, I think, are really fascinating because we all have them. So we have repeating cycles in our lives that we have events that are similar and they look and feel similar to other events. Do we string them together, though? So I'll give you some language around that. Why does this always happen to me? Or, I've been here before, right? As soon as we start those talk tracks, okay, we should start to understand that we're in a repeating cycle. And we will continue to be in repeating cycles until we learn what we're supposed to learn out of, until we get the wisdom out of the experience. And so I believe repeating cycles are very important to our development. They're very, very important to the wisdom that we gain and that we share, not only with ourselves, our souls, but with others. Because repeating cycles is kind of interesting. Things will keep happening over and over again. That might be slightly different, different circumstances, different people, right? But similar circumstances will continue to happen until we get it. And the universe has this kind of odd sense of humor where that it will keep giving us circumstances to learn from that are repeating cycles until we get it. It will keep giving it to us until we get it. And so one of the things I hope we get out of today is about understanding about repeating cycles, okay, and how observation leads to wisdom. And one of the places where we gain the most wisdom is when we understand what our repeating cycles are and we break the cycle. So when we have things that feel similar to like past events or a past event, and we look at it and we say things like, why is this happening to me? Or, boy, this seems like really familiar. Or, oh, this happened to me once before. Oh, I don't want to do that again. All those types of things are signals, right? All those talk tracks are signals for repeating cycles. And you break the repeating cycle by acknowledging it. Once you say, oh, I know what this is, right? Now that's the trigger for you to make a different decision. And if you think about, one decision path leads to multiple other decision paths along the way, and then kind of no two resemble each other unless you continually make the same decision over and over again, same choice, right? And it's really all about choices. So what I'd like us to do is to be really aware of repeating cycles, because they're not chance-based. So we live in a world, right, where we were taught that these things don't really exist, that there is really no symmetry, and that, things are random events. I mean, even if you read any Darwinism, okay, if you were to read any of that, part of what you get out of it is that, just our existence alone is just random, and it's just not the case. And so if we can understand what our repeating cycles are, and repeating cycles are not random, they're absolutely deliberate, because they absolutely want you to get the benefit of the experience. And so you go into observation, and through that observation, you gain the wisdom. So think about repeating cycles. Living in between the experience and observation while experiencing both. So I love this graphic. I've used it before. I think I used it a couple weeks ago, where we have an experience going on, and we're not only having the experience, but we're living it through observation. And we can do both. And that's about being the director and being the observer and having the experience at the same time, right? So how do we have that experience, and how then do we observe the experience? And if we're in observation, as we talked about before, once we move into observation, all the emotional garbage goes away, all the judgment, all the things, labels and all that stuff goes away. And so it's kind of a tightrope, right, in between living in between the experience and observation. Well, once you kind of get the hang of it, it becomes kind of second nature. So when you're when you're having kind of like a high learning environment or something you've never seen before, right? Well, that's kind of a trigger for you to move into observation. I've never seen this. Well, what does this mean? That's a trigger to move into observation and then watch the experience, right? And then, as we talked about, that's what tips over into wisdom. So some how-tos. So when we're having an experience or a repeating cycle, then what we want to start off by saying is, what am I to learn? That's the operative question. What am I to learn? Then the next question is, how does this experience connect to others that are similar that I've had? How does this experience connect to others? Because it's not random. It's not random that the same thing happens to you, has happened to you 5 times in your life, right? It's just not. You're supposed to learn something from it. How did the other similar experiences turn out? Then the second question to that is, what outcome do I want that's different from the other experiences? So what am I to learn? How does this connect to other experiences? How did those other similar experiences turn out? And then what alternative experience do I want to have? Like, how do I want this outcome to be different than what it was before? Those are conscious questions, right? We're really triggering our consciousness. We're triggering our observation. How do we become more aware of what's going on, and that we're not the victim? And then lastly, how might this serve not only me, but also others? Because there is no doubt whatsoever that if you're having a learning moment, you're having that learning moment so that you can share it with somebody else. There's no doubt about that, okay? The universe is not singular that way. It doesn't say, hey, Chris, we want you to have this experience and just keep it to yourself. Don't tell anybody about it, okay? It's not how it works. That's the next part of gaining wisdom, is how might this serve not only me, but others? And it kind of could be random. You don't know. It could be somebody you run into. I had an experience yesterday. Now that I think about it, we were coming back from Maine, and I met some gentlemen. We were pumping gas together, and we started getting into this conversation. And there was something that he and I shared in common. And I shared a book with him that I think he would have found or will find very interesting. It was a book that kind of changed my view on a lot of things. And so it's not only about what you're supposed to learn, but it's also about what you're supposed to learn so you can share with others. So that's a lot to walk with. And please, look for repeating cycles and understand that your observation, okay, eventually turns into wisdom. And that's the whole reason why we follow that path. So have a great week, and I'll see you guys next Monday.